Hi, welcome back. It's Amy. So today we're going to talk about the big question. How did you become a sex offender? I know you didn't just wake up one morning, look on that to-do list. Didn't happen that way. So how did you become a sex offender? Didn't happen overnight. I also feel like it's safe to say it was not a goal of yours. You didn't dream all of your life of becoming a sex offender. On the other hand, it didn't just happen. Things don't just happen. We make choices. So in your case, how did you become a sex offender? You're going to need to take a look at your life. It's not just enough to ask why you are a sex offender, but you have to ask yourself what you've done with your life. Thinking about and talking about your sexual history is a good place to start. Most people who have committed a sexual crime have done it more than once. It's not just a one-off. And I had many offenders in prison who told me it just happened this once. And when we really started talking about things, they admitted that it was not just one time. But you're understandably ashamed to admit what you've done. Not only is there shame and embarrassment, but there's also the fear of consequence. I can tell you that if you talk about, you should be able to talk about all your offenses openly with one caveat. If you disclose to me or a therapist dates, times, places, or names of victims, that means that you are making a commitment to reporting a crime to authorities. Okay? You can talk about your offenses openly without those specifics. I'm not suggesting eluding the law, and I'm not here to get involved in your legal process, but you should be able to speak about your offenses openly without specifics as a process for honest treatment. Your true sexual history is without a doubt a component to making sure that you have no more victims. So discussing it in an open, honest way is the only way to go. I'm sure you have many experiences in your life that are difficult to speak about. The only way to move forward is to understand your past. If you're going to a therapist who deals with sexual assault, they have heard hundreds of cases. You're not going to tell them anything that is going to shock them. And in my time in the Department of Criminal Justice in Texas, I literally read hundreds of offender files containing offenses that you can only imagine. And I was still able to stand in a classroom in front of all these inmates and help them with a smile on my face with the best of intentions. And a therapist can do that for you too. There are some things that I may already know about you without knowing you. Your younger years. For someone who is a sex offender, you may not have had a happy life. You may have grown up in a family where there were problems. It's likely that one or both of your parents used drugs or alcohol to excess. Your parents may have had marital problems, which can include separation or divorce, maybe more than once. You may have had problems relating to your parents or your brothers or sisters, and your family was not close. You may have been considered the black sheep of the family. Chances are you didn't do well in school. You may have been bored much of the time, looking for excitement, and you may have had dating problems. And you yourself may have abused drugs or alcohol. Now, here are some statistics. Statistically speaking, 30 to 60% of men, I don't have the statistics here for women, but statistically 30 to 60% of men who committed sexual crimes were sexually abused themselves. This means either an adult touched you against your will or seduced you at a young age. That is considered abuse. Even if you said yes, if you were 14, you were too young to consent. You didn't fully understand what you were consenting to. 95% of sexually abusive men have been abused themselves in some other way. Physically abused, neglected, something like that, other than sexual. Over 60% of men who have been sexually abusive have had drug and or alcohol problems. And as I've said before, none of these things are an excuse. There are many people who have been abused, sexually and otherwise, who grew up in families that had problems, who abused drugs and alcohol, but they didn't sexually abuse other people. Now, as an adult, your problems probably continued because you were creating the same sort of life that you had as a child. If you've been married, you've probably had marital problems, including divorce, separation, maybe multiple times. You may have even had several unsuccessful marriages. You may be emotionally distant in relationships. You may not have many close friends. You may find it difficult to hold a job. You may not even have any real marketable skills. And you may already be in trouble with the law, if not for a sexual offense, then for something else. Sometimes this way that you live your life puts you at risk for committing a sexual offense. Again, not an excuse, but you just put yourself in risky situations. Let's see how your life may have contributed, not caused, but contributed to you harming others. Emotionally, do your emotions change rapidly? Are you happy one minute, sad the next? Do you ever feel so sad that it's really very difficult for you to get out of bed? Do people tell you that you never laugh? In relationships, on the positive side, do you have friends who are close to their family, who have jobs, who don't use drugs? Or would you say that most of your friends do not have close family relationships? How many of your friends are in jail? Do they use drugs? Do they convince you to, or challenge you to do things that are illegal? And what are your views on drugs and alcohol? Do you use drugs or alcohol to excess? Do you have issues with authority figures? Do you resent authority figures? Police, managers, bosses? Do you have sexual thoughts about children? Do you have sexual thoughts about assaulting adults? Would you rather spend your free time with adults or with children? Are you able to manage your life? Do you have any issues paying your bills, holding a job? Do you always have plenty of food in the house? Do your sexual feelings and thoughts overwhelm you at times? Do you do things that cause sexual harm to others or that you know are wrong? If you are being sexually abusive, then there is no doubt that you have sexual problems in your life. The fact that you are committing sexual crimes is evidence of those problems. So what do all these problems mean? I'm sure that you are an unhappy person and you're hurting. I understand that. You might think that the pain and the frustration that you've experienced in your life is enough of a reason to explain why you've hurt others or why you continue to do so. This is not the case. But it is one step in understanding why you do the things you do or why you've done the things you've done. It's not a complete answer, though. Understanding your history is only part of the puzzle. If you want to know how to stop your sexually abusive and deviant behavior, you're going to have to stick with me here, in addition to seeking treatment. All right, your assignments to finish up the week. I want you to write down the different types of fantasies, daydreams, or thoughts that you've had about committing a sexual offense or deviant acts. I do not want you to write down the details because that's just an excuse to give in to those sexually deviant fantasies. All right, Later, we're going to really examine what deviance is, but is not having sex with multiple partners or role playing, dressing up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or bondage with a consenting partner. None of those things are deviant. Deviance has to do often with breaking the law as a component, hurting someone as a component. We'll go into it more. But things like breaking into a house to rape somebody, if that's what you're fantasizing about, that is deviant. If you fantasize about touching a child inappropriately, that is deviant. And I want you to think about how these fantasies have affected you in your life. I want you to list any crimes that you've committed, any sexual crimes that you've committed. And I want to know, how did you feel right before you committed the crime, while you were committing it, and how did you feel right after you committed it? And I just need one emotional word. I felt sad, I felt crazy, I felt confused, I felt concerned. I just need some emotional words. On our Facebook page, I'm going to give another assignment. It's very easy. It is mainly yes/no questions to answer. So, as I always say, please subscribe to this channel. Leave your questions or comments here or on Facebook or on Twitter. Stay connected, and then you will feel connected. Remember, I am not here to judge you. I'm just here to help you. Next time, we're going to talk about your abuse cycle, which is different than your cycle of behavior that we talked about before. This abuse cycle will be eye-opening. I promise. Until then, thank you very much for finishing out the work week by taking another step in making sure that you have no more victims. All right? Be well.